All right, let's get right into this explainer. We don't often stop to think about the invisible forces that dictate exactly what products actually make it to our local supermarket shelves, and ultimately how much they cost us. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly fascinating world of market access and trade dynamics right across Asia. We're going to look closely at how regional integration and free trade agreements are fundamentally reshaping whole economies, and then we'll dive into some highly specific, real-world trade opportunities playing out right now.
To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to follow a macro to micro path. Here's the game plan. First, the Asian trade landscape. Then, navigating free trade agreements. Third, corporate market access strategies. After that, Japan's rice inflation crisis. And finally, the India-Japan trade opportunity.
Okay, let's kick things off with part one, the Asian trade landscape, the rules of the game. So what are we actually talking about when we say market access? Well, the sheer scope of it goes way beyond just drawing a line on a map. It's this massive, complex web of conditions. We're talking legal environments like tax codes and quotas, strict tech regulations, and even unpredictable natural environments and disasters. These conditions vary wildly from country to country, and they literally are the make or break rules that decide if a business can even survive, let alone thrive, when trying to sell across borders. And just to give you a real sense of the scale we're dealing with here, APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, is the biggest market grouping in Asia. Get this, that single forum represents roughly 60% of the entire world's GDP. 60%. So you can imagine, when countries in this region even slightly tweak their market access conditions, it sends massive shockwaves through the entire global economy.
Moving right along to part two, navigating free trade agreements, degrees of integration.
Think of regional integration kind of like climbing a massive staircase. Nations usually start out at the very bottom, with a simple free trade area, where they basically just agree to drop internal tariffs. But as they climb higher, they might form a customs union with shared external tariffs, then maybe a common market, allowing capital and labor to flow freely. And eventually, they might step all the way up toward full economic or even political union. It's a deliberate, step-by-step process of merging economies together. Now, understanding how they climb that staircase is crucial. There are two main ways to do it. You have negative integration, which I know sounds bad, but it simply means stripping away restrictions, axing tariffs and red tape. On the flip side, you have positive integration. This is where things get highly collaborative. It involves actually building brand new, shared frameworks and institutions, which is exactly what groups like ASEAN are aggressively working toward to build a true common market. And speaking of ASEAN, the numbers they're pulling off are absolutely staggering. By implementing a 0 to 5% tariff range on almost 99% of their tariff lines, they've practically wiped out import duties among their member states. ASEAN has absolutely proven how slashing those invisible behind-the-border barriers directly supercharges economic growth. They've dramatically cut transaction costs, proving beyond a doubt that integrated market access is a massive growth engine. All right, part three. Corporate market access strategies, the players. Let's bring this down from the government level to the corporate level. Toyota is a brilliant case study here. They are the ultimate example of a multinational forced to constantly pivot and adapt its production network. Because, they can't just focus on building great cars. They have to actively dodge volatile currency swings, intense geopolitical friction between superpowers, and constantly shifting tariffs, all just to maintain their market access. Faced with a historical lack of natural resources at home in Japan, plus a really unpredictable yen, Toyota executed a highly precise three-step playbook. First, they totally perfected the just-in-time inventory system to wipe out warehousing costs and waste. Second, they built ultra-flexible assembly lines. But the real genius market access move? Step 3, shifting a massive chunk of their production overseas to places like Thailand and China. That allowed them to dodge heavy reliance on expensive Japanese imports and completely insulated them from geopolitical shocks. Which brings us to part 4, Japan's rice inflation crisis, the real-world impact. Let's funnel all this macro theory down to a very real, extremely timely crisis. Right now, Japan is experiencing a massive shock. This is a nation that is fiercely proud of its delicious domestic Japonica rice and its long history of self-sufficiency. But suddenly, they're staring down completely empty supermarket shelves, huge consumer frustration, and even political shakeups that have cost ministers their jobs. To put a hard number on just how bad this is, by the spring of 2024, the price for a standard 5-kilogram bag of rice literally doubled, It hit a staggering 5,000 Japanese yen, that's roughly 35 US dollars. When a foundational, near-sacred cultural staple doubles in price virtually overnight, the economic and social fallout is immediate and it is severe.
But why on earth is this happening? Well, it's not some sudden fluke. It's a deep structural decline. Look at this. Japan went from churning out 12.5 million tons of rice in the 1970s down to just 6.7 million tons in 2024. The foundation for this current crisis was quietly laid over decades of shrinking output. And a massive structural reason for that precipitous drop? A literal demographic time bomb. The average age of a Japanese farmer today is almost 68 years old. The number of rice farming households crashed from 4.5 million back in 1970 to just 700,000 in the 2020s. The workforce is aging out, and young people simply aren't replacing them. Now, when you smash those long-term issues together with some extreme short-term shocks, you get the perfect storm. First, you had the legacy of the old Gentan policy, where the government actually paid farmers not to grow rice, naturally capping the supply. Throw in brutal summer heat waves that crushed crop yields. On the demand side, a record 36 million tourists flooded in and ate up a ton of supply. And finally, an earthquake hit in August 2024, triggering massive panic buying. The system just totally broke under the sudden pressure.
And finally, Part 5, the India-Japan trade opportunity, the resolution. Historically, Japan's rice market has been practically locked down tight. Powerful agricultural lobbies have strictly controlled market access to protect their local farmers. Right now, Japan only lets in about 770,000 tons of tariff-free rice under a strict WTO minimum access quota, mostly from the US, Thailand, and China. Anything beyond that specific quota gets hit with incredibly high tariffs. But here's how a resolution could actually play out. With the domestic system currently failing, Japan has to look outward. Enter India, the undisputed world's largest exporter of rice. Now, India usually ships out basmati, but in their northeastern states, they cultivate thousands of different varieties, including glutinous or sticky rice like Joha. This presents a massive strategic window for India. If they can tweak these sticky varieties to match the exact tastes of Japanese consumers, it could cool down Japan's inflation and seriously improve India's trade deficit. It's a total win-win. Which leaves us with this final thought. We started this explainer looking at massive macro-level free trade agreements, and we ended up zeroing in on a single grain of rice. Ultimately, solving this domestic inflation crisis might require Japan to entirely rethink its deeply entrenched trade barriers. If India can successfully crack open that market, you really have to wonder, will this localized crisis permanently rewrite the rules of agricultural market access across all of Asia? It's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I really hope it gave you a powerful new lens to view global trade.